I'm not sure what the collective verb for professors is, but we got a load of them here this afternoon, and it is an absolute pleasure to introduce them. None more so than our next very special guest. He is the co-founder and the chair of the World Innovation Network, or Twin Global. Check that out online, but don't get distracted by it during his presentation. He's here today to talk to us about something that is close to us all, but do we really realize? Proximity and creating the futures that we actually desire. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome to the stage, to welcome to GX Talks, the adjunct professor of innovation at the Booth School of Business, University of Chicago, and also the adjunct professor of executive education at the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern. Dubai, please welcome to the stage, Robert Wolcott.
Thank you for having me and all of us. And by the way, a quick thank you to His Excellency Mohammed, to PK, to Chetan, and also to the whole team for taking care of us today. It's a lot of work, and I'd like to give them a quick round of applause for doing that. So I'd also like to reflect briefly on how blessed we are to be here. I feel blessed to be here because I go all over the world in my work to understand how people are approaching the future, how people are building it, how people are attempting to innovate. And it happens more here. It happens more here where people see things and they try them and they experiment, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but you're doing the extraordinary work of creating the future here in the UAE, and it's a privilege for us to be here. So today I'd like to talk to you about a trend that is cascading across every industry, and we'll be doing so for the rest of our lives. It's a trend that when you see it, you'll see it every day. It's a trend that corporations, entrepreneurs, investors, governments are getting ahead of if they're smart. And it's something you can translate into action today, but something you'll see roll out for the rest of our lives. But before I move on with that concept, I'd like to reflect briefly, because you'll see how this trend relates to resilience. We all have this word on our tongues because of COVID. But I'd like to express, I understand why we seek resilience, but that's not actually what we're looking for. From a scientific perspective and complexity theory, resilience is basically defined as the amount of time it takes a system to return to the way it was before after an external shock. The amount of time it takes a system to return to the way it was before after an external shock. And that's not really what we want. We do not want societies, businesses, governments to return back the way we were before COVID. We want to become better. So what we're really talking about is adaptability or evolvability. Evolvability, when people say we seek resilience, it's really evolvability and adaptability that we're looking for. So I'd like you to reflect a little bit on that as we go through this notion of proximity. A second observation I'll make is this is a company some of you are familiar with, Lightyear. I met them in Sharjah back in December speaking for the Entrepreneurship Center there, which was a great experience. Now, we don't know if Lightyear is going to ultimately succeed. There are lots of EV companies. But as you reflect on this concept of proximity, I want you to reflect on the fact that this concept is radically, dramatically different than the old internal combustion engine vehicles that we have all over the world in terms of the level of evolvability, the ability to create power when and where we need it. This vehicle has solar panels across the top. So one would assume over time we'll be able to see whether it's Lightyear or some other company achieving energy produced and provided at the point of demand. And imagine how dramatically different the world will be when we can do this across industries. So we'll come back to this. So everybody's been paying attention to all these technologies. You can add other ones to the screen. But what few people have noted is that all digital or digitally enabled technologies, so we're including 3D printing, we're including rooftop solar energy generation, for instance, each of these digital technologies allows us to compress and distribute in smaller and smaller packages all around the economy, ever closer to each moment in time and space. And therefore, what digital technologies allow us to do in distributing these capabilities closer to each moment, and this is the key point, Digital technologies push the production and provision of value ever closer to the moment of demand in time and space. Now, understand what I'm not saying. What I'm not saying is just a little bit better supply chain management. That's not what proximity is about. That's a nice thing, it's a good thing, but it's an incremental change on the way it was before. I'm literally saying we are developing business models and technology platforms to allow us to wait, to allow us to procrastinate until there's an actual demand for an actual product, service, or experience. And then that product, service, or experience is produced and provided right there, co-located, coterminous with that need. Now, I'll give you an example. We all know Amazon, big creepy company in the United States. They're watching everything we do, what we click on, what we search for, cursor hover time. There's something called cursor hover time. I call that digital drooling. So Amazon watches me and my behaviors, and they notice I keep going back to that fishing rod my wife told me not to buy, but Amazon knows I'm gonna buy that fishing rod. So they send that exact fishing rod to the distribution center near my house before I've ordered the product. That's called anticipatory shipping. They've been doing it since they received a patent for it in 2013. Do you think they're getting better at it? But let's shift to physical products, not just better distribution. Today, we have a global supply chain optimized for scale manufacturing at a distance. The larger my plant, the lower my costs. Not always true, but for the most part. Over the next 30 years, this model will be ripped apart. Now, note what I'm not saying. What I'm not saying is 30 years from now, there will be no massive manufacturing plant in China or the UAE or Mexico. Of course, there will still be massive plants where it makes economic sense. But we will also start to see mid-sized plants closer to demand. We're already seeing this with reshoring and deglobalization. We'll start to see small production facilities in urban areas near the points of demand, near consumers and businesses, and eventually on your counter at home. We can't do it yet, but imagine a 3D printer at home that is capable of creating products on demand when you need them, where you need them, and no more. Now, let's think for a second how difficult it is to buy one matching metal fork. It turns out it's really hard to buy one matching metal fork. How do we do it? Well, someone in Western Australia mines iron ore, puts it on a ship, sends it to Southeast China. They melt it down. They send it to another plant. They alloy it, make 12 matching forks. They put them in a box, slide it into a pallet across the Indian Ocean to the port, and I buy 12 matching metal forks. Today, it is technologically trivial. We cannot do it because the infrastructure does not yet exist. It is technologically trivial to download a design file, push a button, and print one matching metal fork. This notion of proximity is rising not because it's fun and cool, but because it will start to make economic sense in more and more environments. Because we can do things today and in the future that we could never have done before, and that is the essence of finding breakthroughs. Right here in the UAE in December when I was here for Sharjah, I visited Botanica Crop 1, an alliance with Emirates near the Dubai airport. This is a photo from inside that facility. They grow leafy greens and they're looking at other kinds of produce. It's the largest vertical farm in the world currently operating. I've got to tell you, as an engineer, it was extraordinarily exciting to see this, but as a human being, it was even better to try the product. The quality, the flavor, the texture was absolutely extraordinary, and here was the punchline. They told me the product I was eating today would actually be picked and sent to the airport, and I would also receive it in my salad on Emirates Airlines the very next day. That's proximity. So this, of course, is the flag of Bangladesh. Bangladesh has been making lots of changes. By the way, there's a lot of innovation that goes on in Bangladesh. As a Bangladeshi friend of mine said to me once, in Bangladesh, we've been doing so much with so little for so long, we can now do anything with nothing. That's a place to go find innovation. Now, here's something they decided about 15 years ago. The government said, we need more electricity. We don't have enough electricity for our population. We need to drive growth. That needs electricity. Therefore, by 2024, we must have enough electricity for the whole country. And guess what happened? They did it. They built enough capacity, much like this. They built enough capacity to provide power for the whole country. But here's the punchline. Here's the problem. They still have brownouts. They still have parts of the country that don't have access to electricity. But guess what's rising? Solar. Distributed energy, closer to the point of demand. Energy generated close to where people actually need it. And what does this provide? It provides resilience. It provides more flexibility and adaptability. So when those massive 19th, 20th century plants, when they have an issue or when the grid has an issue, the local solar and battery storage can take over. Now, it's not just products or energy. It's across all aspects of how we live. I don't have time to explain it in detail today, but the beginning of 2024, we have a book coming out from Columbia Business School Press called Proximity, so you can go deeper. But to give you an example from the services side, this is Uncork, and full disclosure, I'm an investor in this company because it's one of the most exciting platforms I've seen that is pushing this notion of proximity. This is a leader in the no-code movement. What does this mean? This means if you need to create enterprise-grade secure software, you don't have to go to the IT department. You don't have to go spend 18 months developing it. You and your colleagues, as smart business people, can sit down on this platform and build enterprise-grade secure software within a matter of weeks. That's proximity, bringing a capability so close to the moment of demand that we produce only what's required, when it's required, as opposed to the old model where we made millions of copies, put them in inventory, and then threw them in the trash when no one was ready to buy them. So what happens as a result of proximity? Expectations of your citizens and your customers rise dramatically. We're already feeling that. We break, for the first time in history, we break the trade-off between customization and efficiency, customization and cost. We will be able to produce products that are highly personalized at vanishingly low cost. That has not been a model we've had privy to in the past. And finally, most exciting, waste declines dramatically. So this company, On Demand Pharmaceuticals, this friend of mine, Colonel Jeffrey Ling, had this idea when he was serving in the US military. They kept running out of generic drugs. So he said, why can't I just make the drugs right here on site myself? And they did it. They've developed a piece of equipment about the size of a small refrigerator. It has carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen in it, basically. You type in, I need 300 tablets of ciprofloxacin, and out a few hours later come 300 tablets of ciprofloxacin, exactly the way you would find it at the pharmacy. I need 1,000 doses of atropine. Out comes 1,000 doses of atropine. Now here's the punchline. Ciprofloxacin has a shelf life, 2 or 3 years. There's a point where you take your ciprofloxacin that no one's used, you throw it out, and you make new product. What is the shelf life of carbon? Forever. So you see how these proximate technologies, they don't just make it a little bit better. They rip apart the model and transform what's possible. So you want to talk about sustainability, start to figure out how to make what you're offering, products, services, experiences, more proximate. What problems are we trying to solve? In this world where proximity becomes possible, we need to think about the problems we're facing differently. I was working with a company before COVID, and they were saying we were going to take a process from 2 months to 2 weeks. And I said, that's great. What if someone can do it in 2 minutes? And guess what? Someone today can do the same process in 2 minutes. Had they done that project, they would have wasted 6 months of effort. So my question to you is, what problems are you trying to solve? And I'll conclude with a brief story. People only see the things for which they're looking. This is actually cognitive sciences validated this many times. We only see the things for which we're looking. So therefore, having the mission in mind, the purpose, why, makes us better. And this is my second favorite story from the history of science. This fellow Dr. Fleming, you've probably heard the nice story about how Dr. Fleming was studying bacteria and something got in the Petri dish by accident, and he said, oh my gosh, doesn't kill the bacteria, it kills the bacteria, won't kill me, and thus was born penicillin. Now, about a quarter of us would not exist in the room today had it not been for this product, for this discovery. What most people think this story tells us is not actually what it tells us. They think, aha, so innovation is about serendipity. So I can just skip along and one day I'll discover penicillin and win a Nobel Prize. But that's in fact exactly not what was going on here. What most people don't know is that dozens of researchers had seen exactly the same thing happen for decades. For decades, researchers would go in the lab and they would see the stupid stuff in the Petri dish that killed the bacteria, and they'd say, oh, merde, and they'd throw it out and they'd start all over again. Two researchers in the 1920s wrote an article to help their colleagues stop getting the stupid stuff in the Petri dish that keeps killing the bacteria. Why was Fleming the one who uniquely saw? Well, one, he was a creative individual. We have to give him credit for that. But two, he served in World War I. And as a result of that experience, he saw thousands of people dying of infectious diseases. And therefore, he made it his life's purpose, not just to understand bacteria for science. He made it his purpose specifically to understand bacteria, to try and understand how to protect human beings from it. So because he had the purpose in mind, he was the one who uniquely saw. So in conclusion, I would ask you, what problems are you trying to solve? Are they big enough? Do they matter? What's your purpose? And what challenges will we pose to ourselves? Because, by the way, our job as leaders is to pose challenges to ourselves and our teams before the market does it to us. Because it will. Thank you very much.